It is now December, and as we work our way up towards Christmas, I'm sure that many of us are doing the requisite Christmas time activities. Setting up the tree, drinking the hot chocolate, being woken in the night by a ghastly specter that confronts us with the ways in which we've wronged humanity and begs us to change. We've all had that last one happen, right? I feel like Christmas's darker side is often overlooked or swept under the rug. After all, this is a time when everything is meant to be merry and bright, wholesome and pure. But Christmas has always had a darker underbelly. Since its origins thousands of years ago and up into the modern day, glimpses of this darkness have shone through. And I believe that these little moments can do a lot to show us what Christmas was, what it represents now, and why, no matter how hard we try, we cannot escape the shadows cast by the brightest time of the year. In the grand scheme of things, Christmas is really new, and I'm not just talking about Santa Claus and electric lights. Although midwinter festivals of some kind or another have been celebrated for thousands of years, some of the most important hallmarks of our current Christmas celebrations, the connection to family, the feast, the connection to Jesus Christ, these are things that were only formally adopted in the last few centuries. And yet, so many cultures around the world hold this time of year, the very beginning of winter, sacred in some way. And this is because, through most of human history, we have been farmers. The rhythms of life were dictated by the seasons. Spring was an incredibly busy time, recovering from winter and getting all of the seeds planted for the growing season ahead. Summer was even more of a frenzy. As crops were growing, you had to keep them safe, you had to keep your animals alive, and the days were very long, allowing for a lot of work to take place. Autumn was the final push, the gathering, the harvesting, the preparing, battening down the hatches for winter. By the time December rolled around, there was finally time for everyone to catch their breath. There was relatively less work, the days were short and the nights were long, so what else were you supposed to do but eat, drink, spend time with others, and take a moment to feast before the long winter began? One of the most influential of these December festivals was the Roman festival of Saturnalia. Dedicated to the Roman god Saturn, this would begin on December 17th and sometimes last up to a week. During these Saturnalia festivities, there would be food, drink, games, and often a playful reversal of the social order. These traditions ranged across time and space, but oftentimes servants would be given a singular chance in the year to do what they liked. They would be able to dine at the same table as their masters, and in some cases they would reverse the order completely, and the masters would serve their servants for the Feast of Saturnalia. Of course, everyone knew that as soon as Saturnalia had ended, the social order would go right back to where it was before, but that didn't stop them from enjoying this brief moment of equality. It's actually quite interesting that in its subversion of the social order, Saturnalia went to great lengths to reinforce the very social order it subverted. Traditional Christmas misrule did not ordinarily pose a significant threat to the social order or to the authority of the gentry class. In fact, it actually served to reinforce the existing order of things by providing a sanctioned opportunity for the poor to let off steam. It was a safety valve that allowed them to express resentments in a fashion that was generally apolitical. Indeed, the form that misrule commonly took, that of inverting the ordinary social structure rather than simply ignoring it, may have served to confirm the legitimacy of the status quo. On top of establishing Christmas time as a season for madness and misrule, Saturnalia also set the groundwork for Christmas time charity. This winter festival could be a time when you stopped looking at the people below your station as inhuman and instead opened your hearts, homes, and tables to everyone. Now, all of that nice stuff about Saturnalia being said, it should be noted that this was also a time when there was probably human sacrifice, which is generally frowned upon, so, you You can't win them all. In the early medieval period, we have record of people celebrating the Feast of Fools in early December, in which they took on the Saturnalia-like reversal of the social order, and the junior clergy would switch roles with the senior clergy. This would also evolve into traditions like the child bishop, in which a boy would be elected to play the role of bishop through the winter festivities. Towns or communities would elect a lord of misrule, who is in charge of picking the plays, masks, and songs that would entertain people through long winter nights. Plays of the Elizabethan period speak fondly of this storytelling tradition. In The Winter's Tale, Shakespeare writes, "A sad tale's best for winter. I have one of sprites and goblins." These December festivities were a time for gathering close, for disregarding class and station and coming together as a community. And it seems that scary stories were an important part of this. A lot of medieval storytelling, including Christmas stories, are splattered with gore, with beasts, with monsters. In the 14th century story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the extended Christmas revelries of the court of King Arthur are interrupted by a massive green knight bearing an axe and a challenge. The brave knight Sir Gawain takes up this call to a bloody end. Gawain gripped on his axe, gathered and raised it. From aloft let it swiftly land where 'twas naked, so that the sharp of his blade shivered the bones, and sank clean through the clear fat, and clove it asunder. And the blade of the bright steel then bit into the ground. The fair head to the floor fell from the shoulders, and folk fended it with their feet as forth it went rolling. The blood burst from the body, bright on the greenness. And yet neither faltered nor fell the fierce man at all, but stoutly he strode forth, still strong on his shanks, and roughly he reached out among the rows that stood there, caught up his comely head, and quickly upraised it, and then hastened to his horse, laid hold of the bridle, stepped into the stirrup iron, and strode up aloft, his head by the hair in his hand holding. And he settled himself then in the saddle as firmly as if unharmed by mishap, though in the hall he might wear no head. The idea of Christmas being something highly polished and pure, a festival for children, was simply not the prevailing notion of the time. Christmas was a time to let loose, to enjoy the fruits of your labor while you still could, to join together with your community and recount fun, grisly stories, as well as to celebrate the birth of Christ, a meaning it gradually took on through time. Of course, not everyone was such a huge fan of this rather debaucherous Christmas celebration. The Puritans of 17th century New England were particular haters. They actually banned the practice of Christmas outright. That's right, you could be fined a whole 5 shillings if even a joy to the world slipped past your lips in the wrong company. But you know what won't get you a 5 shilling fine? The glasses from this video's sponsor, Warby Parker. Warby Parker is dedicated to helping you get the glasses that you need. They have an online shop, retail locations, and they design all their frames in-house. They have everything from prescription lenses to sunglasses to contacts, with all of their glasses starting at just $95, including prescription lenses. With their home try-on program, you can order 5 pairs of glasses to try on at home for free, and there's no obligation to buy. Shipping is free too, including a prepaid return shipping label. I was able to take their home try-on quiz, and they gave me a ton of excellent recommendations for glasses that might fit me. Here we have our handy-dandy try-on kit with all the glasses. This pair is definitely still my absolute favorite. They've got Victorian librarian vibes, and they're really lightweight and sturdy. Now that being said, I love sunglasses. I wear them pretty much all the time, and these are a little bit greenish, and they are perfectly my style and so cute. As you can see, I got a bunch of different sunglasses to try on, and they're all really cute and they fit my style super well. The quiz did a great job. You can try on 5 pairs of glasses at home for free using this QR code or the link in my description. And if you have vision benefits when you're ready to buy, you can use your vision insurance or flexible spending account on prescription, glasses, contacts, and eye exams. From designer quality glasses and contacts to eye exams and vision tests, Warby Parker has got you and find your eyeballs covered. Thank you so much to Warby Parker for supporting the channel, and thanks to all of you for checking out my sponsors. While Puritans led the charge against Christmas in the 17th and 18th century, all around the world, Christmas wasn't necessarily very popular, and the people that did celebrate it didn't go in for the full misrule, more or less just another opportunity to eat and drink and tell stories. This proved to be a bit of a challenge to the religious authorities that were re-examining the holiday. If they were going to celebrate Christmas, which they did want to, they were going to have to find a way to clearly differentiate it from its debaucherous past. This new form of Christmas that emerged in the early 1800s was a much more solemn affair. It was specifically dedicated to celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ, even though Jesus probably wasn't born in December, but that's a topic for another video, and it was marked by religious observances, and by more quiet celebrations within the home. As domesticity became king in the Victorian era, Christmas time went from being a time of outreach, a time to celebrate the community around you, to being a rather insular holiday, a time for family to gather close in together and turn their backs from the cold. Of course, that turning inward meant that anyone who wasn't part of that relatively well-off nuclear family was left out in the cold. While the Industrial Revolution allowed for more and more comfort and luxury within the home, it also highlighted the harsh socio-economic divides that were splitting up the new century. The rich were getting richer, that's for certain, but that meant that the poor were getting poorer. It was a scary time for a lot of people. Society was progressing, whatever that means, but it was at the cost of children getting to have childhoods, of the once unpolluted air of Europe, of the rhythmic agrarian life that once held almost all of humanity to its unchanging schedule. New science was destroying the worldview of the past, and pollution, disease, and sanitation were becoming huge problems, especially in densely populated urban areas that were only becoming more densely populated. Many writers of the Victorian era sought to capture this fear in their works, but none were quite as successful or prolific as Charles Dickens. Dickens was a journalist and a novelist writing in the Victorian period, and many of his works focused on the wealth disparity that was quickly becoming more and more of a problem, and the plight of the poor person in the newly industrialized age. And at the crux of this ever-growing problem was that pesky old Christmas. While this holiday was gaining a new, wholesome glow in the home, from the streets, the view was not quite as flattering. By the early 19th century, with the spread of wage labor and other modes of capitalist production in England and the United States, the battle for Christmas entered an acute phase. For some urban workers, the Christmas season no longer entailed a lull in the demand for labor. Their employers insisted on business as usual. The lull in labor that we had in December, back when we were working on farms, was one thing. There was nothing you could do. Of course you were just going to sit there. But in this newly industrialized age, if you weren't working, you weren't getting paid. Your family would starve, and with layoffs around the Christmas season, it was becoming less and less of a thing to celebrate. Christmas was once this moment to breathe, a chance to play with the social order, a chance to engage in charity, but it was quickly becoming something selfish. It was a luxury for the wealthy and a mockery for the poor. And all of this comes to a head in Charles Dickens' 1843 novella, A Christmas Carol. A Christmas Carol introduces us to Ebenezer Scrooge, the personification of everything that was wrong with society. Scrooge has made his business cold, hard cash. He gives nothing to the world, he just takes and takes. But what was really unique to the Victorian era was just how invisible this wealth is. It exists not in gold, not in land, not in station, but in checks, in numbers in ledger books. Scrooge lives a miserly, stingy life, never spending his money, just accruing more and more, curling up like a dragon on his icy, uncomfortable bed of gold. He was a tight-fisted hand-at-the-grindstone Scrooge, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner, hard and sharp as flint, from which no steel had ever struck out generous fire, secret and self-contained, and solitary as an oyster. When Christmas time rolls around, Scrooge certainly isn't taken by any Saturnalian goodwill. He berates his nephew. What's Christmas time to you but a time for paying bills without money? A time for finding yourself a year older but not an hour richer? A time for balancing your books and having every item in 'em through a round dozen of months presented dead against you? People try to get through to Scrooge. Carolers come to sing to him. He's asked to donate to charity. He even gets a visit from his nephew. And their view of Christmas is far sweeter than Scrooge's. Certainly, wealth disparity is felt acutely at this time of year, but shouldn't that mean that those who have plenty open their hearts, their homes, and their tables to those who do not? At least once a year, shouldn't we be able to let go of our strict social station and see those around us as fellow men, rather than as tools to be exploited? But Scrooge, too locked into the harsh mentality of his era, is unswayed. It is here that the supernatural intervenes, and it might seem a little bit odd to suddenly be introducing ghosts here, but I think in the context of the Victorian period, it makes a lot of sense. This was a time when science was in a really weird place. We were beginning to move on from the beliefs of the old days, theories about the four humors needing to be balanced in our bodies, but we still hadn't all come to terms with reality, with germ theory and whatnot. Now, that being said, we weren't fully ready to abandon the supernatural beliefs of our past, so instead we found creative workarounds. Witches were falling out of favor for the more scientifically viable vampire, and specters and ghosts, which were long believed in, were being grouped together with illness under the umbrella of miasma. Miasma, the idea that bad air caused illnesses, became more and more prevalent, and between pollution and airborne illness, it's not hard to see why it took such a hold in the early industrial period. Plus, miasma could help to explain ghosts. Rising from their graves in the form of harmful miasma, the dead pollute the air, permeate the wells, and bring disease and death to the living. In popular lore, ghosts were said to haunt the living for a purpose. And indeed, these miasmic emanations have a role in the moral economy of nature. Unable to fulfill their appointed function, the dead return from the grave like restless and vengeful ghosts to remind society of its neglect. Dickens was well aware of this new miasmic spiritual science, and it's no surprise that this idea made its way into his Christmas Carol. In the middle of a cold, lonely night, with Christmas looming just over the horizon, Scrooge is visited by the ghost of his long-dead business partner, Jacob Marley. Marley appears translucent and fleeting, racked with misery, pinned down to the earth by the heavy chain that rests about his neck. The chain, he explains, was forged by his misdeeds, every ungenerous business choice, every cruel thought, every hungry face ignored. Marley tells Scrooge that he wears a chain just like Marley's, only it is longer, for every agonizing year that has passed since Marley's death. "But you were always a good man of business, Jacob," faltered Scrooge, who now began to apply this to himself. "Business?" cried the ghost, wringing its hands again. "Mankind was my business. The common welfare was my business. Charity, mercy, forbearance, and benevolence were all my business. The dealings of my trade were but a drop of water in the comprehensive ocean of my business." Marley departs, but it is with a dire warning. Scrooge will be visited by more spirits, and he must learn to change his ways or submit himself to eternal torment. Throughout the night, Scrooge is visited by the ghosts of Christmas past, present, and future. The ghost of the past shows him his challenging, but not joyless upbringing. He's forced to watch as his innocence is frozen over into a stilted, all-consuming greed. The ghost of Christmas present shows Scrooge the world he's walked past every day and never seen. His nephew's warm, jolly home, the poverty on the streets, his own employee so poor that he's struggling to feed his large family, but so rich in love. Scrooge sees the full, beautiful range of the human experience that he has denied himself. Finally, the ghost of Christmas yet to come shows Scrooge the funeral of a man who is loved by none. In the grave, this man is worth nothing but the money he amassed over his life. Cold, unfeeling gold, his only gravely companion. That man is Ebenezer Scrooge. This is the final push that Scrooge needs. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, and the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. Scrooge awakes to find that it is Christmas Day, and he keeps his promise. He provides for his employee and his family, he makes amends with his nephew, and he finally puts his money to use, living a full and fruitful life by giving himself to others. At its heart, A Christmas Carol is about a man waking up to truly see the world around him. What is the point of money if it is not to be spent? What is the point of others if not to be known? What is the point of a life if it's not to be lived? And what's so fascinating about A Christmas Carol is that although it has become one of the quintessential Christmas stories, it doesn't really fit into the very solemn version of Christmas that many churches were pushing at this time. It doesn't even really fit into the Victorian domestic ideal. In many ways, I would say that it reaches back to the age of Christmas misrule. It uses the wedge of spirits to pry open the private, solemn Christmas and show the way that this season should be a time of reaching out instead of in. The frightening supernatural forces were a way of taking Scrooge outside of himself, out of his petty selfishness and greed, and his silly little earthly concerns, and showing that there is so much more than just him as an individual. Now, of course, I'm not trying to say that A Christmas Carol is somehow unchristian or pagan. In fact, goodwill and charity are goals of the Christian church. But if we are to create this false dichotomy of the holy, pure, kind of closed-off Christmas and the older pagan Christmas traditions of being open and within community, A Christmas Carol manages to find a spot right in between those two. It's showing that although Christmas is a time for goodness and holiness, a bit of fear will not go misplaced. A Christmas Carol and the traditions it preaches, the roast goose, the gifts, the games, this charity, would come to shape the Western imagination's Christmas dreams. But there were still other older folkloric Christmas time traditions that were still lurking, especially in Central and Eastern Europe. And many of these creatures use terror as their primary tool. The most famous example is probably Krampus. He's covered in fur but stands erect on his cloven hooves, a nod to his demonic origins. 2 devil horns sit atop his head, and a long, forked red tongue juts out of his mouth like a serpent. He's wrapped in chains and carries a sack or a basket that he fills with every naughty child he can find. He scoops up the screaming brats, stuffs them into his sack, and carries them back to his mountain lair where he kills and eats them. Come St. Nicholas Day, all of the naughty children of the world are dead, so St. Nicholas is free to bring gifts to all of the good girls and boys, because good children are all that's left. Krampus has somewhat recently gained a bit of a reputation overhaul due to the internet being the internet, but there are many other scary Christmas beasts. Take, for example, Belsnickel, a ragged, fur-clad man who accompanies Saint Nicholas, ready to beat disobedient children with a switch. In Iceland, parents told their children tales of the Grýla, a wicked witch living in the wilderness, ready to disembowel bad runaway children with a long knife. Less intensely, but still in the same tradition, we have Santa Claus, who apparently watches every child in the world while they wake and while they sleep, ready to give gifts to the good ones, and to give only coal to the disobedient children. These traditions prove that there is this prevailing idea that in order for Christmas to be the happiest and most beautiful time of the year, some foulness must be purged first. There has always been an awareness of the shadows cast by the light, and by creating these monsters, we put a face to the shadow. We give ourselves a way to defeat them. Ghostly works like A Christmas Carol, along with these older folkloric traditions, would go on to shape the European vision of Christmas going forward. And while there was an awareness of these darker practices in America, and works like A Christmas Carol did become popular, these never quite translated across the Atlantic in the United States. This is likely due to lingering fears left behind by the Puritan hatred of Christmas misrule, but I also think that it can be attributed to the American celebration of Halloween. Halloween, much like Christmas, emerged from a kind of soup of seasonal folkloric practices. Perhaps the most influential is the Gaelic feast of Samhain, a harvest festival which celebrated the year that had been and prepared the community for the darker seasons ahead. This festival, just like Christmas, was adopted by the Christian Church. It was integrated with All Hallows Eve or All Saints' Day Eve, but many of the traditional Samhain practices, such as wearing costumes, going house to house, even bonfires, were adopted into the more secular practice of All Hallows Eve or Halloween. Now, Halloween is acknowledged and sometimes celebrated all over the world, but it was in America, with its sudden influx of Irish immigrants in the 19th century, that Halloween as it is today really shaped up. Halloween is a big deal in America, and I think that its popularity, as well as its proximity to Christmas, allowed us to push a lot more of the darker, ghoulish Christmas traditions off onto Halloween, distilling this concept of Christmas as pure and wholesome. And this disparity of the pure, wholesome Christmas and the dark, heathen Halloween is called into question by movies like A Nightmare Before Christmas. Directed by Henry Selick, this film is based off of a poem written by famous writer-director Tim Burton. Using a distinctive, exaggerated animation style, they are able to show the interplay between these two conflicting cultural forces. The film launches us into Halloween Town, where they are celebrating yet another spooktacularly successful October 31st. Seething with monsters, goblins, and ghouls, Halloween Town is a nightmarish place led by the Great Pumpkin King, Jack Skellington. Once the revelry settles down, though, it's revealed that Jack is unhappy. Despite his success and his station, something is missing, and Jack believes that he discovers what that is when he stumbles through a portal into Christmas Town. Christmas Town seems less like a nightmare and more like a dream. It has neat, identical houses, it's got an army of happy, rosy-cheeked elves, it has a mission of pure, unadulterated joy. Jack is smitten with the look of everything, with the veneer of pure, sickly, sweet happiness that seems to coat the air around this so-called Christmas. He is enamored with the idea of making people happy rather than scared, and he takes some relics of Christmastown back to his domain. But Jack's excited efforts to explain his discovery to the residents of his town quickly fall flat. The residents of Halloween Town just don't get it, and try as he might, Jack is unable to replicate the magic himself. He cannot rationalize or control the power that Christmas holds. Frustrated, Jack falls back on old ways and decides to claim Christmas by force. He and the residents of Halloween Town kidnap Santa Claus, make their own gifts for the kids of the world, and Jack rides out in a slapdash costume to hijack Christmas cheer. But in doing this, Jack has missed the point of Christmas completely. By assuming the role of Father Christmas, Jack assumes the act of faith without the content of faith. Jack seized upon a symbolic and incomplete system of faith, and attempts to make it complete by sheer insistence of will. Jack's attempts to force Christmas cheer result in him being shot out of the air by the army in a desperate attempt to end his reign of terror. Realizing the error of his ways, he makes amends with Santa, he allows Christmas to continue under proper jurisdiction, and he learns that sometimes a spark of joy cannot be forced or controlled. It must be fostered and nurtured. And with that mindset, he can bring the excitement and the wonder he found in Christmas back to Halloween Town. He has entirely new eyes, a new lease on life, and a new lease on love. By setting up the dichotomy of Christmas and Halloween, A Nightmare Before Christmas is able to explore this complex relationship between fear and imagination and wonder. Perhaps we're all a bit like Jack, mired down by the real, frightening world around us. Christmas joy is something wonderful and precious, but we smother that spark if we try to control it, to use it, to force it. Instead, maybe what we need to do is bring that joy back into the real world with us, and leave the mystery to be a mystery. While A Christmas Carol shows how fear might be used as a tool to correct someone's role within their community, A Nightmare Before Christmas shows us how fear is a tool that can be used to institute internal change. A Nightmare Before Christmas opened the door for a larger discussion about the true meaning of these holidays in the modern age, namely our expectations of them versus the reality of them. And there is another scary movie that dives into this concept in all its gory detail, the 2015 film Krampus. Krampus introduces us to a familiar scene, a modern family just about at their breaking point, trying to pull it together and make Christmas work. They go through the motions, they decorate, they have the family come over, they have the meal, but underneath all of it is this seething resentment. Amongst these shallow, self-absorbed characters, there's really only one of them that still sees any real value in Christmas, and that is Max. Encouraged by his German grandmother, Max tries to keep the spirit alive, committing to his annual tradition of writing a letter to Santa. In the letter, he asks for only one thing: that his family could get along for the holiday. His family finds this letter and then mocks Max for his naivete that he's still writing letters to Santa. Max tears up the letter, claims he hates his family and Christmas, and the next morning, all hell breaks loose. A storm sweeps in and knocks the power out, and one by one, the members of the family start to go missing. The grandmother quickly surmises that this is the work of Krampus, the beast from German folklore. She explains that in her childhood, she too lost the Christmas spirit and asked for Santa to take her parents away. In answer to her calls, Krampus came and took everyone to hell except hers. Krampus has come here now to make good on Max's Christmas wishes. What follows is a little bit frightening, but mostly ridiculous, as Christmas decorations and toys come to life, taking away the family members one by one. All the superficial vestiges of Christmas joy destroy the family instead of bringing them together. In the end, Max is the only one left alive, but he offers himself as a sacrifice if Krampus will only safely return his family members. He apologizes for losing his Christmas spirit and explains that this experience that they've had has brought them together in a way that they had never been together before. They love each other, and he loves them, and he wants them back. With that, Max is taken down into the depths, but he wakes on Christmas Day. His family is downstairs around the tree waiting for him, and while they all know that something strange happened to them, they can't quite put their finger on what. Either way, they are finally happy to be together. It seems that Krampus's intervention has fixed the family and fulfilled Max's first Christmas wishes, after all. Of course, then the scene zooms out to reveal that this has all taken place in a snow globe where they've been trapped as part of Krampus's collection, so perhaps he's not quite as forgiving as we thought. Krampus is a little bit spooky, and honestly a lot a bit silly, but I do think that it is an interesting entry into the spooky Christmas canon. We got to see this family's inner darkness splashed out for all to see. Once again, it seems that the brightness of the Christmas season only serves to highlight the worst in all of us, and scarier Christmas movies refuse to brush that under the rug, instead confronting it face to face. I think that the dark underbelly of the Christmas season has only become more acute these days, where Christmas has become an industry. Starting as early as September, ads start popping up telling you that you need to prepare yourself and your wallet for Christmas. After all, every person in the family has to have their perfectly Amazon gift-wrapped present under the tree come Christmas morning. You're probably going to need new Christmas lights, new lawn decor, new Christmas-themed dish sets, a sparkly snowman, a snow globe. It's Black Friday, you better get ready to spend. Expectations for this time of year are just sky high. You're supposed to take time out of your usual routine, you're supposed to take time off work, you're meant to travel, you're meant to go to the parties, you're meant to wear the right outfits, get all of the pictures, post all of the pictures, buy all of the gifts, spend more and more money just to make sure everything is just right. It's the incessant, endless noise of the modern day. The rattling of tinny hip-hop remixes over store speakers through fluorescent lit aisles packed with people, packed with shiny new things. And on top of all of this, you're meant to be the happiest in this time of year that you're going to be for the next 365 days. And it leaves you wondering, what is Christmas outside of the expectations of what you thought Christmas should be? How few there are who can hail the approach of this busy, happy season without a pang. Who can hear the first faint tremulous notes of the Christmas hymn without a something which is akin to pain vibrating in their hearts? Who, amid the laughter and merrymaking around them, are not conscious of a certain silence and stillness within, a silence of the heart which refuses to echo the general gladness, to respond to the gaiety outwardly assumed, and a stillness of the spirit, which no earthly power will ever quicken into life. The fact is that in the midst of the mirth and feasting and rejoicing, we are haunted, many of us, by legions of Christmas ghosts. The higher the expectation, the more painful it is to fall short. Especially in American culture, we have years upon years of media showing us how Christmas is this divine season where only joy prevails. By refusing, ignoring, and brushing away Christmas stories that deal with the darker side inherent to the season, we leave ourselves with little to no solace when our modern Christmas experiences fail to match up with the imagined Christmas past. Were our ancestors younger and more light of heart than we? How is it that they pranced and frolicked and made fools of themselves under the mistletoe as though there were no troubles in the world? Had they no gaps in the family circle? No Christmas ghosts to whisper in their ears? No shadows of their lost youth to darken the present mirth? Or is it that they were simpler and more kindly and more forgetful of themselves, that their hearts expanding in the genial atmosphere of Christmastide could lay aside all selfish considerations and frankly enjoy the happiness of others? This sentiment, expressed in an article by M.E. Francis, is one that I've heard a lot before. The good old days just look so good What is so fundamentally broken about our modern society that we cannot recreate the bliss of the past? Well, I hate to burst your bubble, but that article complaining about how broken and corrupt the modern era is compared to the past, it was written in 1888. That means that for at least the last 135 years, we have been comparing ourselves to the past at what should be, and we have been left feeling inadequate. And I think that's why I love the scary Christmas story so much. Compared to a lot of the Christmas literature and media, which seeks to affirm the sanctity of the season, the scary Christmas story pokes a hole in the bubble of that put upon Christmas perfection. It tears back the layers of polystyrene snow to show the grime underneath. Subversive Christmas movies give us the chance to sit back and ask ourselves what, beneath the veneer of consumerism, of branded movies and cookies and hot chocolate and Amazon packages with shiny little bows on them, what matters and what should matter. Christmas rituals, whether in the form of the rowdy excesses of carnival or the more tender excesses that surround the Christmas tree, have long served to transfigure our ordinary behavior in an almost magical fashion, in ways that reveal something of what we would like to be, what we once were, or what we are becoming despite ourselves. It is because the celebration of Christmas always illuminates these underlying features of the social landscape, and sometimes the very fault lines which threaten to divide it. Christmas is not, as some people like to say, some stern bastion of centuries-old, untouchable tradition. It never has been. It is an ancient tradition, but it is also an entirely new invention. It is what we make it. It can be a chance of levity at the darkest time of the year. And using Christmas as a time for introspection, for considering the darker parts of the human experience, it doesn't devalue the joy of the season, it enhances it. The holiday season can be exactly what you want and need it to be. Not what it should be, because the concept of should be is as much of a social construct as Christmas itself. Now, I want to be really clear for the sake of my reputation that I am not advocating that we return to Saturnalia. Once again, human sacrifice is largely regarded as not cool. But I don't think that it would hurt to step outside of the bubbles of expectations of what we should be doing and allow ourselves a little bit of Christmas misrule. Maybe we should let the ghosts of our past, our present, and our future unearth themselves so we can face them head on, rather than burying our heads deeper into the pile of mass-produced gifts. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to use Christmas not as a chance for escape, but as a chance to reach beyond ourselves, to be in community with each other, to figure out who we have been, who we are, and who we might want to be in the future. So maybe you should try and read, watch, tell some scary Christmas stories this year. After all, the ghosts of Christmas aren't going anywhere, and maybe that's a good thing. If you have any recommendations for scary, or even just less traditional Christmas stories that I can read or watch this year, let me know, because I'd be really interested to watch some new Christmas stuff this year. I do feel like I kind of talked really bad on Christmas throughout this video. I swear, I do like Christmas, but I think it's tough because it's a season when you're really supposed to be happy, and so when you're not happy, it can be really difficult. So I hope that whether you celebrate Christmas or not, you are taking care of yourself and others this season. This isn't actually going to be my final word on Christmas this year. I'm going to be doing a video closer to Christmas, talking about Santa Claus and the myth of Santa Claus. So we're going to hear more about those creepy little Christmas guys, as well as St. Nicholas himself, who was a crazy man. So stay tuned for that, and consider subscribing if you want to catch a video about storytelling, the Lord of the Rings, and other stuff that I like to talk about every single week. Give this video a like if you get the chance, because that really helps me out, but I am just so grateful to have you here with me today. Be sure to stay warm and safe, and make sure that you have a very happy hoppity day.